My name is Clyde Kerr Jr. I'm a trumpet instructor, and I've been at the Louis Armstrong camp for 16 years since it started. I'm very happy to still be here. Well, yeah, I think it's very important to New Orleans because it's showing us that this legacy of this music that started here in New Orleans will be carried on, and that's the whole, I guess, the whole description of New Orleans music or jazz music is that the older musicians pass it on to the young musicians, and they in turn pass it on to the next generation. So that's the way I see it. In the camp, we have several former students here who are teaching now, and so that in itself is giving us a good indication that this camp can go on and on and on, because we're not only teaching students about the music, but we're teaching them in ways so that they will become great teachers too and pass it on, you know. Well, this past year, I was awarded an honorary doctorate degree by Loyola University, and I've been teaching for 45 years. So I guess also this year I put out my very first CD myself. I played on many CDs and started CDs on myself, but finally did one this past year, and I guess that brought on recognition by other folks who kind of took a look at my history too and say, oh, this guy not only been playing around New Orleans for 45 years plus, but he's also been teaching. So they've looked at that and awarded me with that, and it's great to be recognized. I really appreciate that, because not only I feel that they honored me with this award, but they also honored my father and my mother. My father was a musician and educator. He was very instrumental in helping develop the instrumental music program in the public school system. And my mother, you know, the role she played in my life, she sang around the house. So being under her foot as a little kid, I heard her singing, and I realized later on in my life that my trumpet sound is the sound of her voice singing, you know. A self-taught musician, I would say, because his degrees from college, he graduated from Xavier University, his degrees was English and science, but he had a love for music. And there weren't any schools in New Orleans at that time to teach you about how to play this jazz music, because at that time it wasn't even respected in the school system. And there weren't any schools around to teach you how to write and arrange music. He did all that on his own and became a great composer and arranger for big band music. He was very much influenced by Duke Ellington, Count Basie's band, Jimmy Lunceford's band, and what he would do, he would copy the records, and he learned from that how to write music. And he would tell me stories how he would sometimes save up his money, and a nickel here, a dime here, go to Worldline and buy one piece of music at a time, like one trumpet part, the next part, third, and would put it all together, make a score to see the way they were written. And he learned all kinds of ways. And having the type of scientific mind that he had, he learned the formulas for copying music like Duke Ellington's music, and how to arrange and the voicing of the different instruments, the clarinets, the muted trumpets, the baritone saxophone in the high range, how to put those instruments together to get a certain sound. The way Beethoven wrote his music, especially when he lost his hearing, he had it all in his head. And once my father learned those formulas, he was able to write even without a piano. And I remember as a kid growing up, I came up in a Treme on Rushblade Street, and when I was 3 years old, 1947, or 4 years old, I remember taking all the furniture out of our living room, putting it in the alley, so all these musicians would come in to practice, and there were great people who later on from that group of musicians went on to do some great things like Alvin Red Tyler, Clarence Ford, a great saxophone player, Wardell Kazare, John Fernandez, Richard Payne, Dalton Russo were some of the trumpet players. Benny Powell, who just passed, he was a trombone player. It was about 30 some odd musicians in my living room. And when I look at that house now and think how small it was amazing how all those people we used to fit in. It was a shotgun house. And the musicians would tell me when I was a little boy, I was mischievous. I would start in the kitchen with my arms opened up like an airplane. And the music they used was these old wire music stands, and I would start running from the kitchen straight to the living room with my arms out, knock everybody's music stand down, and run straight out the front door. And they would tell me how bad I was and that they were worried about me, but I had turned out pretty good because those same musicians that were in my living room helped me when I became a professional musician, and they just gave it back what my father gave to them. And that's what I feel that I need to do, is give it back and keep passing it on, because they handled me with so gently, because I knew I didn't know anything, and if they weren't the right type of people to tell me things, they could have crushed me and I never would have gone any further. But they kind of supported me and directed me the way I needed to go. So I appreciate that. Well, some of those who've come to the jazz camp, some have national acclaim, some people may not know about, but they're making a living playing music, and that's a good thing. Christian Scott, he's out there with his own record label, he's doing well. Trombone Shorty, he came to the camp, he's out there, he was on David Letterman recently, is getting a lot of acclaim. Some other musician, there's a young lady, Courtney Bryan, who taught here for a couple of years. She's working on her doctorate degree in Columbia in New York, and she's a fine composer, has a couple of CDs out. A lot of people here may not know about her, but she's doing fine. Nicholas Payton, he didn't come to the camp, but he's out there making a good living, playing music, and well known. Andrew Bayham, he's playing and traveling all over the world and making a good living. One of our teachers now, Marlon John, was one of my students at NOCA. I gave him his first trumpet lesson. He's more like a nephew to me because Kid Jordan is like a big brother to me, and that's his son. So Marlon is teaching, and he travels and plays all over the city and is well known as an excellent trumpet player and a teacher. Oh man, I started Big Sam with Funky Nation. He came to the camp, one of my students at NOCA. Just the other day, well, yesterday we went on a field trip. We saw the Stooges brass band. Just about all those guys in the band, Ursel and Floyd, and some of my former students from NOCA. And whenever I see them and they're making a living doing what they love to do, that's success. You know, it's not like somebody out there beating somebody in the head and taking their money. They're making their own money. That's wonderful. Well, yeah, I think it's a good thing, because just the name Louis Armstrong, lights go off. It's big because of the kind of person he was and what he stood for, his love for music, his humanity, his spirit, his everything that he stood for. He was, oh man, there's no words I can think of to express what I think about. The only time I ever saw Louis Armstrong, I was a little boy, is when he was the king of the Zulu parade. And I remember my mother taking me to see the Zulu parade, and I was a little kid, and she pointed, see that man up there? That's Louis Armstrong. And I remember looking at him. Because where I grew up in New Orleans, not too far from Dookie Chase's restaurant, and the Zulu parade would come down that way, and on Orleans Avenue, and all around that way to North Galvez, and well, I think teaching, whatever you're teaching is a matter of being able to bring a person to the point of making choices, the correct choices for themselves. And I always think about the story about feeding a man or teaching him how to feed himself. If you teach a kid how to think correctly, they can make the right choices. And if you teach them the fundamentals of music, they can make the choices of playing like this or playing like that. They can make their own choices. And that's what music is all about, the choices that you make in life. Because most of the New Orleans musicians that I know, they play, like myself, I played brass band music, I played with funk bands, I played in the orchestra pit. Kid Jordan and I have done all this together. I played, in the big band situation. So because we have the fundamentals of music, we could read and we could improvise. We could play with music in front of us, or we take the music away, we still can play. Electricity go out, we still can play. Not electrical instruments can't do that, but we can function in any particular setting. So that's very important, especially if you want to make a living at doing this music now, especially. Because like I said, mostly New Orleans musicians that I came up admiring, they played in various situations and were able to make a living. So I really believe that if you give them the knowledge of music and how it's put together, then they can come out and make their own choices, which I think whatever the subject matter is, that's what we want to teach a kid, to get to the point they could think and make the choices for themselves.
Very good.
Well, because all those tunes, I look at those songs that are on my CD like my children. So when I do it like that, I'm acknowledging this. And I think it's also a link to a certain period in time, because mostly those tunes I wrote, they were some in the late 60s and the 70s. It's a link between a certain thing, and I think the youngsters need that, because so many of the youngsters today haven't experienced what I've experienced in my life at the rhythm and blues part, playing in the nightclubs. And most of those tunes come out playing in nightclubs and playing with bands like that. Nowadays, you don't have any clubs where you could go dance and listen to bands play dance music in the club, other than the brass band setting. But that configuration I use on the CD is like with the electric bass drum. It's more like, I came through in the 60s playing with a band called Oliver and the Rockettes. It was a great band. And from that band, we had another band called the Music Factory. And that music represented that period of my development when we played that kind of thing. And there's a tune on there called Sylvia's Kitchen, which is like what we call a shuffle. A shuffle is a certain rhythmic drum beat, and that represents, like when we used to play in the country, you go across the tracks, and before you get to the place, you could smell the fried chicken. So it's like a chicken shack where people would dance, and there was a kitchen where you get greens, cornbread, and all that stuff. And everybody's playing together, and the band's going wild, and everybody's dancing, and sort of like in the movie Color Purple, you know, where that went on in those there's music, the chicken shacks in that story. Um, my closing remarks, I like to say, I guess, when I look at the kids that we have here today, it's like almost the new kids on the block. We like redevelopment. It's like a great football team. All our first string players have graduated. And then you can see the new ones coming up. And out of those, some of the kids who've been here a couple of years, you can hear the development and how they're carrying it on. And there's a lot of newer kids involved with that, and hopefully the young ones who have more experience will encourage the other ones to step up, because that's what it's all about, stepping up. Okay, now it's your time to step up, and that's the whole legacy of this. And we're in a developing stage of the new kids on the block, and I hear from our rehearsals that, I mean, it's good now, it sounds good now, but these kids who are here now, they'll be back next year, maybe a couple of more years, and we'll have to start doing this all over again. And that's the beauty of it.